mother, sister, brother, and you think you're living the best life. You think you're just in this like little paradise where you've got the good life. We say even if that's correct, we don't think they give much analysis, but even if you think that's correct, that shouldn't be something you choose for yourself, because you have no ex-ante reason to believe that that way of living is the idyllic life. You have no reason to think that what the Sentinelese are conditioned to think is good, and what they're conditioned to aspire for, is what you should aspire to, okay? If you did, you could just go and live that life yourself once you study their practices from an anthropologist. What that means is, we don't think that good life is a good life. Just like the life where I have a perfect partner and wonderful kids and whatever, but it's all hallucination, is not a good life for me. It's not what I want to choose. This life where even if it's happy, even if it's comfortable, because you buy into the culture, if you don't think that culture is correct, if you don't think those values are true, and you wouldn't live by them anyway, you shouldn't follow that life. And there is second thing, right? And this comes to the moral impact. There's a reason why we debate stuff. There's a reason why we argue, why we engage in moral reasoning. It's because we think we make progress. It's because we think we're more able to get to what's right now than we were 100 years ago. I can promise you, if this debate was run 50 years ago, the argument on God would not be, you need to move to these islands because of climate change. I can promise you the arguments would not be, think about how gay people might be presented in these cultures. We've made tremendous progress over the past 50, 100 years to discussing. Our moral views are dramatically different, even in like our own countries, to what they were 100 years ago. And I think it's arrogant to assume that we've reached the end of history, that we're all perfect. We can all think to what we thought 5 years ago and feel embarrassed about some of the moral decisions we made, some of the moral views we held. What you do if you make a decision based on your views now is you calcify. You say you can never change. You lock yourself into your current view of life when you put yourself living there for values that can't evolve. Why does that matter? First of all, it matters because you may live a bad life in this country. We've said these societies could be patriarchal. They say people are naturally pro-social. Evolution conditions us to have lots of morally problematic things. For instance, to shun people based on taboos. That's why we see widespread homophobia in a ton of different societies. To attack outsiders, to punish people for marital infidelity. There are good evolutionary reasons for all of these things, and we think they're morally appalling. We think it's bad if you do those things in those societies, you'd be living a bad life. But yes, them.
Of the few people with the freedom to self-actualize in the way you describe, it's just as likely that the primary influences in your life, cultural, familial, so on and so forth, are conservative and hateful as they are liberalizing.
No, we think that you can search things out, and we just think, look, there are going to be flaws, but we think the reason why we debate, we think society's views are much better now than they were 100 years ago, because if you reason enough, you make good progress over time. In a further 50 years, we'll make more progress. So secondly, it allows you to course correct. So we just think it may not be clear in 20 years' time that climate change is the top priority. Maybe green energy does solve this stuff, in which case you would have made this decision to live a certain life on bad grounds. And in the case where it does still seem like climate change is the most important thing in 20 years, you would assume your reasoning self can adjust to that, can try and live a life, can fight campaign for climate issues. But we, at least on our side of the house, have the ability to take what we know after 30 years of debate and make a better life 30 years down the line. You lock yourselves in. That means you don't do good. Now finally, on material. So, OOs say there's way more good stuff like antibiotics. OGs say, yeah, but there's less war, and no, climate change, and you might be more contented. What does Debbie do? Debbie says, think not about the status quo now, but the extent of change that you're going to have over the next 30, 40 years. Yes, this was thrown away as a line in the LO, but we analyse it. Why do we think a bunch of changes are going to reach some of the poorest in society? Look, bear in mind, you're going to be like 25 in 2050, in this debate, right? One, because lots of technologies, once they go off patent, have very low marginal costs. Lots of drugs are basically free after they go off patent. That's why we see deworming things helping lots of people in Africa. We're seeing malaria vaccines being rolled out across the African continent. Loads of people are benefiting there. Secondly, Debbie highlighted large progress in the marginal cost of energy, with solar panels dropping. What's this mean? One, it deals with lots of the CG stuff. But two, energy is one of the basic costs for everything we do, as is labour, which AI is also reducing the cost of. As these marginal costs reduce, eventually those will be computed away, passed on to people, and even the very poorest will be much better able to achieve goods. In 30 years' time, we think even in the tough countries, your life's going to be way better than the Sentinelese. We're very proud to oppose.
Okay, I thank our speaker for their remarks, and I invite everyone to shake hands outside, and we will call you back.
Which button?
The gray one.
I'm sorry.
Right? Is it this one?
Oh, the silver button?